All right, so here we have a 2006 Honda Ridgeline. The customer is stating that when they turn the corner, they have a clicking noise and a vibration, but more so the clicking noise is going to be what brought it in. So we got the car up in the air right now. We can see that this CV joint has expelled some grease in the past. So that one definitely has been a problem for a while. We see the inside joint has just started expelling the grease, so it's a lot fresher look for the grease. We haven't got the road grime to grab onto it yet. Being that this is clicking, we're going to go ahead and replace the whole CV axle. If it was just a boot leaking, we just lost the boot and the grease came out, we would just put a new boot and repack it. But being that it's clicking, the bearings and everything inside we know are no good. So we're going to go ahead and take the tire off, start breaking this down to get the axle out. All right, so now we have the tire off. We're just going to point out a few things of what we're going to do to remove it. So this is front suspension. Normally when you move anything in the front suspension, you need to do an alignment. So we're going to try to keep, the adjustment points. We're not going to mess with this stuff. We're going to remove the lower ball joint. It's kind of a fixed joint. We're not going to remove where the strut touches the knuckle because that is an alignment adjustment. This should be pretty, go back the way it should. We do need to remove the sway bar so that we can pull the lower control arm out of the way so we can actually, get the axle out. So we're going to go ahead and work on now removing the lower ball joint and removing the sway bar link from where it mounts to the strut. All right, so to take this off, there is an Allen insert here, and you put the Allen wrench in and then you can ratchet it. We're just going to try to hit it first with the impact and see if we can just get it to come right off. All right, so now we're going to remove, we have a cotter pin right here we want to remove before we can get that. All right, so now we got the bolt off here at the lower ball joint. So this is a tapered fit for this ball joint. So to release it, what we're going to do is we'll get the mallet on this back side here. There's a nice little flat tab that sticks out. We'll go ahead and hit it. That shock should drop, should release that joint. All right, so we just added a little pressure to it that time as I hit it. So now we have that joint loose. The next thing we're going to do is we have a bolt on the outside holding the axle in. We'll go ahead and spin this nut off. All right, so this is a 36 millimeter. These are pretty specialty for doing these. So we'll go ahead and we'll spin this off. It will just release the locking tab as it comes out. All right, so sometimes the axle spline and the actual hub spline, they stick together. What I normally do is I'll put the bolt back on just a little bit, or the nut back on a little bit, and really you can hit on the end of it, but then you'll mess the threads up, which wouldn't matter for us. We're going to throw it away. I normally just do this just to not hurt the threads, but just give it a little release. All right, so now we're going to pull the joint all the way out of the lower ball joint. All right, so now we have it loose, and we do have the steering wheel not locked, so we do have some play. We're not actually stuck. All right, so now we got it loose. We'll go ahead and pull that out. All right, so now we have just the inner joint. All right, so now we want to pop the inner CV joint of the axle out. So there's like a little C-clip retainer on the inside of the shaft, and that's what's holding on. So we're going to use a pry bar. We're going to get it wedged in between the base of the axle and the transmission housing. We'll go ahead and give it a little a pop. And that should release it. Sometimes they are fight, normally not, but sometimes they do. All right. Go ahead and gonna lose a little bit of fluid here, not much. You can see this is the C-clip. That's what holds the inner end. All right, so here we have our new axle that we got from Auto Parts Direct to You. We'll go ahead and just lay it next to it. The old one, make sure everything looks good. All right, so we got a new nut that came with it. All right, so go ahead and put the axle in here the same way with how we had to pop it out. All right, so we know it's seated. So what we just want to do is pull it back a little bit and just kind of all right, there we go. We just had to overcome the C-clip to get it to latch. So now the axle's in. Now we'll just go ahead and we'll slip the axle back into the hub bearing. We want to make sure that we line the splines up. Okay. So now we're gonna pull the lower control back arm back down so we can get to the ball joint back into its spot.
How hard is it? I could probably hang off.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. All right. Okay. All right, so now we have it. Let's go ahead and, now the reason why we're stuck here is we have to start feeding the axle in. And there we go. All right. So now we'll go ahead and start putting everything back together. We'll start with the lower ball joint. All right, so just go ahead and we'll give it a little bend at the end here. That'll keep it in. Okay, so now you want to go ahead and connect our sway bar back up to our strut. All right, so we're going to try the same method we did before with just using the impact and not trying, so this stud is a ball and joint. So if the nut goes on the stud real tight, it's going to actually spin the bolt inside of it. That's why the Allen head is on the outside, so you can hold the stud and actually get it to tighten up. All right. We're going to go ahead and put our nut back on the axle. There is a torque spec for this. Normally axle bolts are somewhere in the 240 foot-pounds. All right, so on this one, we're just gonna hammer this corner in right here to fit it into that groove, and that's gonna be how this locks in. And that would be how that bolt keeps from backing off. That's the lock for it. All right, so we'll go ahead and put the wheel back on. We did leave some transmission fluid a little bit. We'll start the car up, put it in neutral, warm it up, make sure all our fluids are correct, and then we're ready for the test drive.